Hello, everybody. This is Dr. Dan Cardellichio. Want to welcome you back to another installment of Momentum Monday. I'm here with my partner in crime, leadership expert and attorney and author of Move the Ball, my friend, Jen Garrett. Jen, how are you today?
Hey, I am doing fantastic. It is another amazing Monday. The Chicago weather is fantastic. It's going to be in the 70s. I cannot complain, and I'm ready to get some momentum going on this fine Monday.
I love that because in New Jersey, it is about 70 degrees today too, and it is a beautiful day.
Nice.
It is a great week to get it going, and so let's get it going. Let's move the ball. So, Jen,
Yes.
Jen, let's talk about We Care Holiday Drive. We spoke about it a little bit last week. Let's discuss it again so that we can have individuals donate because this is very important during this time of giving holiday season. What do we got?
Yeah, so We Care is an initiative that my Facebook group called She's Got Game put together to really try to make an impact across the US in 8 cities, in particular San Francisco, LA and Orange County, Chicago, Minneapolis, Dallas, Houston, Atlanta, and Jacksonville. And so there were so many other cities that we could add, but we had to say, okay, well, let's bound this, right? And just start with these 8. And really, we're just trying to make a difference by raising money. We have GoFundMe links set up for each of the cities, and we're
Mhm.
trying to raise money for women and children who are victims of domestic violence, because we know that in today's time, especially, there are so many more cases, unfortunately, because of people being at home. And so it's very sad. And there's a lot of emphasis also on homeless shelters and food banks. So it seems like this might be a population that very much has a need, and it might not be getting as much attention. So we wanted to try to help in that area.
Definitely a worthy cause. And during the time of COVID, there are many different adverse effects, right? Correct, that have happened in
Yes.
addition to catching COVID. So this is a worthy cause. We are supporting you in your cause in each one of the offices. And the goal is to raise $5,000 for each of the 8 cities. And next
Yes.
year, you and I were discussing, and I said, let's make it 10,000 and let's make it where we are going to have more cities that are involved. So I think that's a worthy goal, and we're going to move the ball in that respect. So for everybody listening, it's going to be in our show notes. There's going to be a link that you can go to and that you can donate. And it doesn't matter, right, Jen? It could be a couple of bucks to whatever you can do, right?
Right. And even if we're not in your city, I mean, if you're in a position to give, even if it's a couple dollars, I mean, every little bit helps. And I'm going to share out there that we started this drive beginning of November, and it hasn't been going that well so far. So we're really looking for help. And I think this is important because we should always ask for help when we need it, right? So I'm asking for help to everyone listening to share with people in your networks that you think would be in a position to give as a little bit or a lot. That would be great. And I think because of the election, people have been distracted. So I'm hoping that in the last 3 weeks that we're doing this drive, that we'll get some more momentum. So really need everyone's
Right.
help, whatever you're able to give. And if you're not in a position to give, if you're willing to share with others, I mean, that's all that we ask.
So for all of our listeners on Momentum Monday, as well as Move the Ball podcast, as well as Destination Health podcast, as well as Wellness Wednesday Worldwide podcast, I want you to donate, all right? Even if it's a couple of bucks. I understand the whole country's been preoccupied at this particular juncture. Totally get it. However, this is what we want to do. We want to make sure that we're able to help out individuals. It's the holiday season, and let's just, even if it's for a couple of bucks, let's do this and let's help out. Jen, is there anything else you want to discuss about that?
No, I mean, I think all of us, coming together can really make an impact. And so I'm just really looking forward to trying to bring some additional joy and positivity, some people that may be struggling right now.
All right. So for all the podcasts that Jen and I are on, and for all of those listeners, please share it. Family, friends, coworkers, neighbors, in your community.
Oh, and then
So,
where can you go before we move on? So you can go to powerandimpact.com, and
mhm.
all the GoFundMe links are listed there. We have one for each of the 8 cities that I mentioned. And so again, appreciate you all sharing with your networks, donating if you can. It really means a lot to us.
And for all my New Jerseyans out there, please open up your wallet some. And if there's any cities that you want to include in our in Attorney Jen's next fundraiser, contact me or Jen, and we'll make sure that we're able to discuss and perhaps put this on the list. So thank you very much to everybody in advance. Now, Jen, you've had a milestone just recently.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
You've had a milestone and you've had your first year, full year as an entrepreneur. Oh boy, are you sweating about that right now?
It's been a crazy year to do it
Uh,
in COVID. I mean, to be an entrepreneur at any time of the year, or any with anything that's going on in the country and the world, it's a risk, right? But this year especially has just been a doozy. It's a real technical term, and so
you know
now
what? In the entrepreneurial realm, a doozy is used quite frequently, just to let you know that.
and so it's interesting. I think the biggest thing for me now that I've hit that year milestone is looking
Mhm.
back, right? The year in review. And I did a post on LinkedIn and Facebook about, what things that I've learned along the journey. And it's been a year that I've learned a lot about myself. I've learned a lot about being an entrepreneur. I don't care how many experience or years of experience you have in business, you are not fully prepared for the entrepreneurial world until you get in to it. I mean, I had 7 degrees, right? I worked for big Fortune 50 companies, executive roles. I was like, oh, I am ready, and I'm not going to make those common mistakes because I have all this experience. And maybe you don't make some of the common mistakes because you have a little bit more experience, but inevitably something is always going to go wrong. Things that you think are going to go well will not, and you're going to have to learn to pivot and adjust. And so that's just the normal entrepreneur path. Then you layer COVID on top of it, and it's just magnified, so much more. And it's been an interesting year to just kind of see the obstacles that have come my way. But I'll say the one thing that I never said to myself was, why the heck did I leave? I should have stayed. There was not one day, no matter what, even when the Dow Jones was down 3,600 points in one
Mhm.
week, not once did I say, you know what, I should have stayed. And I think for me, just having that courage and that faith to keep going, and knowing
Mhm.
that if you keep showing up and doing what you're supposed to do and trusting that process, it's going to work out. It may not happen as quickly as you want. There were days I wanted to bang my head against the wall. I did not do it literally, but I mean, it's part of life. Even if you're not an entrepreneur, right? Things are not always going to go your way, and you have to trust the process, have
Right.
faith that it is going to work out. You may have to pivot and pivot some more, but it will work out if you stick with it.
And we've discussed this in your book, Move the Ball, where sometimes you have to pivot, you have to set
Mhm.
your goals, but you have to be savvy enough to sit there and say, I need to pivot at some particular point. This is not working, and I know it's not going to work. And then you have to move it in a different direction. When I first got into business for myself, I called it organized chaos. It's kind of crazy, and it is a moment to moment situation where you're making great decisions, and then the next moment you've made the worst decision
Mhm.
that you possibly can make. But if you move the ball and you stay focused and you look at your goals and you have those good people around you, you're going to make it. You just have to keep moving forward. And Jen, I think what you said before is extremely important. Nothing in the world prepares you to be an entrepreneur except for doing it. You got to take
Mhm.
that plunge. You have to take
Yes.
that plunge. And without taking that plunge, you can read, you can just look at everything, and you just got to get in. It's great to read the books. It's great to read Move the Ball. It will help you, but you got to you have to get into that arena in order to do it. So what were the top 3 challenges outside of COVID that you've had where you had to move the ball over the last year?
Well, yeah, great question. So a couple things. One, my primary focus when I left, I mean, I am an attorney, but that wasn't my I wasn't going to start my law practice, right? I was really going to focus on helping organizations, companies kind of achieve higher performance. When COVID hits, that market all went away.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a bit, it's tied to COVID, but it's separate, right? But it basically, the market demand for what I had to offer was essentially non-existent. And so I had to figure out, okay, what's next, right? Because and so I pivoted, and so I started working more with individuals one-on-one. I focused more on working with sports organizations and athletes as well. And so I think that's part of the thing, is figuring out what's the next thing that's going to stick if the thing that you set out to do isn't sticking. So that's what I would say is the first piece of it. The second, I would say, is challenges when you're pulling together a team to help you do something, and not everybody ends up being like, people back out at the last minute saying, I got other things to focus on. These are not employees, right? These are just people you're looking to collaborate with, and you have these big goals, and then they flake on you, and it's like, oh, well, thank you so much, but the show must go on. So now that adds extra stress to your day, right, as you're trying to work on this collaboration effort with the remaining people that are still in the project. So I would say that was a second challenge, was just overcoming the dynamics when people just don't pan out, and that's part of life, whether you're an entrepreneur or not, right? So I'd say that's a second piece of it. I think that one of the other biggest challenges, this is a great question, I'm trying to think of big challenges versus little tiny day-to-day.
You know what? Even if you give us even if you discuss a little challenge, because sometimes those little challenges can make all the difference that you can pivot, or you can just, forge forward. So it could be a little challenge, even if it's a little challenge that you've learned so much about.
Let me think here. This is a good question.
You know me, Jen. I always ask a question.
Got me stumped here for a second. I'm trying to think what would be something. I mean, I guess what I'll say is that you're going to face a ton of rejection along the way, right? And so that's not necessarily a little thing, but when I was thinking littler, you have appointments that you set up with people. They flake on you. They don't respond back. And it's frustrating. And it's something that I never, ever had to deal with. When I worked in the corporate world, I worked for GE, one of the most powerful brands in the world. People showed up for your appointments, right? Yeah. And so so there's a couple of things. One, people making time on their calendar, but then not showing up when the meeting happens. They don't respond back to you. They completely ghost you. It's like, really? Wow. I mean, I think we can all deal with, you send a note to somebody and they don't respond. You're like, okay, whatever, right? Move on. But when you you invest time and have a back and forth, and then you set a meeting and then they don't show up or have the courtesy to let you know, hey, something came up or I'm not interested. That's very frustrating, because you think that as people, we can be respectful of other people's time, and not everyone is mindful of that. So I'll say that's something that I've encountered, unfortunately, a number of times. And it's annoying.
Yeah. And I think it was Churchill who said, success is moving from failure to failure, or in instance to instance, without the loss of enthusiasm, because the life of an entrepreneur is a roller coaster for sure. And that's why we got to get the book, Move the Ball, because it's going to help you through that. So what do you got coming up for the next year, Jen? What's on the horizon for the next year? And who knows, maybe I'll ask another question after this. Okay.
Before we go to that, I just want to say something about rejection, because I think it's important too, is rejection. I think it's important I think we all know conceptually that you have to go through the no's to get to the yeses, right? But that's not always easy emotionally to go through. But if you always remember that rejection is really a redirection of where you're meant to be, I think it makes it easier, right? Like those that say no to you, all that means, that doesn't mean that you're not of value, or the services or the products that you provide are not of value, that just means that those people that say no are not meant to be on the journey with you. But there are other people out there that could use what you have to offer. So it's just a matter of finding them, right? And so not getting discouraged when you get these no's. And something that that I didn't share on the show yet, I mean, it is year one, and it's easy to say all these things, but I mean, I'm happy to share that I did have a 6-figure year one, and even in COVID, right? And so, I mean, it's
Congratulations, Jen. That is fabulous, because I will tell you that everybody comes close to that. A lot of businesses take 3, sometimes 4 to 5 years before they start turning a profit when you're first starting out.
right.
That is very, very common. Been there.
Thank you. And so, and I'm not sharing that to gloat, but I think it's important that, like, if you put these things into practice, you trust the process, you keep being consistent, you show up every single day, you don't let the rejection discourage you. It's not fun to be rejected or to have that no, but when you realize, like I said before, that the no is part of the journey, it's easier for you to just say, okay, you know what, that's not the one, let me keep going.
Right. It's really, when you're an entrepreneur, it's about learning. It's about learning. And so if you're rejected, perhaps it's the individual on the other side. Perhaps it's us, the entrepreneur. Maybe we need to learn something, and we need to approach something differently than what we did beforehand. Rejection is something that is part of being an entrepreneur. And it happens more often than not, especially in the beginning. I can tell you, I've been rejected a billion times over the last 30 years, but not so much anymore, because as you become seasoned and experienced, you've learned, and you're able to help out a lot of people, and you're able to bring them into your fold, and you're able to help them, and you're able to move the ball with them in many different respects. So yeah, rejection, as my mother said to me when I was the tender age of probably 8 years old, son, and my father, son, you need to get a little bit thicker skin with every experience that you have, right?
Right. Yeah. And I'll just add one more thing on the rejection piece, and then we can move on. So one of the biggest things and the most proud things that I can say about this journey is that I've had the courage to hold myself out there in a way that I'm not afraid of what other people might think. And I would encourage everyone to think about that. I mean, no matter what happened last year in my business, I was proud to say that I was willing to always stay true to myself. And that sounds so cliche, but when you're in the corporate world, and I was talking with a friend of mine who's a senior executive at GE about this just last week. When we're in corporate leadership roles, there's always this, I have to be on, right? I don't show the struggle, or you're reserved. And as a good leader, you want to be reserved in how you behave, but you're also reserved in what you share with people, right? And it's always have to share strength instead of highlighting the other pieces of your story, which are not necessarily the most fun, but there's lessons to be learned, and there's connections you can build with other people because of that. And what I've learned is, by sharing those pieces of my story over the last year, you're going to connect with some people, and some people it's not going to be for them, right? And for those people that don't connect, if they're not interested in what I can provide, if they don't see value, that's okay. Like you're not here to please everybody, and you're going to attract the right people to have as friends, as customers, as clients, by putting yourself out there. And so for me, that's the biggest thing that I've been proud of, is that I'm not afraid to share any aspect of my story. If
the naysayers come out when you're sharing your story, or you're doing your thing, if you will, don't worry about them. Just keep moving the ball. Keep moving the ball, because not everybody's going to be on your team. It can come from anybody, and generally it comes from the ones that you're closest to, right? So it seems to be, it could be a spouse, significant other, parents, grandparents, children. They may not understand, family members, but you keep moving the ball. And we have an international audience today, by the way, Jen. So we have Andrea on, we have Jerry on, Jerry Leonarducci, he and I, we have a podcast, Bloomfield Avenue, Michael Riccardi, and we have Angela Cardellichio from Italy today listening to us. Angela, you know what? Maybe the next podcast we will do in Italian. Jen, do you speak Italian?
I do not. I'll have to.
Oh, we're gonna have to teach you. We're gonna have
Yes.
to teach you, a little bit. Can you speak Spanish a little bit? Un poquito? No,
Not much.
no.
No. I took French in high school and college. So.
All right, I took French too, so maybe we'll do it in French. I haven't spoken French in a while. So if any of you are out there that are listening to this, if you have any questions for Jen, please put them in the comment box, and I have my phone here, and we'll make sure that they get answered. But we're international now, Jen. I love it. Okay, Jen, what's going on for year number 2? You have something you want to show us here. I know that.
I do. Yes.
You have a prop today. Props are always good when you're talking.
I do have a prop. And so, I just finished year 1, and, when you just finish a milestone, you do a review, and then you think about, okay, what's next? Right.
Correct.
And so I've been, thinking about my next year, and I'm excited for it. You had asked me the question that I hadn't answered yet about what is year 2 looking like for me. And so I talked about pivoting. My pivot is I'm pivoting again in year 2 slightly. So I'm still working with individuals one-on-one, but I'm also pivoting back and working more with businesses as we are figuring out how we work through this new normal, right? Back last March, people were just trying to survive. Now businesses figured out, okay, this is the way we're going to operate for a while. So let's figure out how do we do it right. So I've been doing a lot of virtual trainings with companies on a couple things. One, how do you manage and stay connected to your employees when most people are remote in many companies nowadays, right? So companies that have not done that traditionally might be struggling with it. There are some bigger companies that have been used to that. So, this is more normal. However, now they're seeing more of their workforce being in this environment. So how do you make sure that you're being more productive and effective with this larger remote workforce? So I've been working with businesses on that. And the last part is that is how are you helping your employees to really maintain their mental well-being when the lines have now been blurred between work and home life because people aren't going to the office, right? Everyone's at home. And so there's a lot of people struggling with that, and they're feeling overwhelmed. They've got kids at home. So working with companies on that. So that's more of my focus in this nearer term. So I'm excited about that, to work with some companies on that. But the thing that I wanted to share was, no matter who we are, entrepreneur or not, we get overwhelmed, we get tired, right? That's part of life. And so there are days that I'm tired too, and I drink a lot of coffee to give me energy. But I get tired, and
you're gonna have to start working with me nutritionally then, because I'll get that energy right up without that caffeine. Anyway.
And there are days that we get discouraged when things aren't going how we want, when we have these quote unquote failures or rejections. And so it's very easy to stay in that state of negativity if you're not aware of it. And I found myself the other day just being like, man, I'm really tired. I've hustled and grinded. That's not a word, but for a year, and it's tiring. I'm like,
when you're an entrepreneur, you can make up any word you want and use it for your benefit. Grinded is a word, just to let you know. Okay.
Okay. And so I was just like, man, all right, now that I've put out that I've had the 6-figure year, pressure's on, right? Like we want to do, twice that or whatever, like have another amazing story for year 2. And so I was just I'm like, I'm tired. What am I going to do? And I found this sign. Can't read it, and I'll read what it says. But I was on a podcast a couple years ago, and as a thank you gift, the woman who had the podcast had sent me this little sign with a quote from our show. And the quote says, "Figure out what you need to do to get there." And I remember that over this past year, there had been many times, not many, but a handful of times that I'd been discouraged. And I'd seen that sign because I have it in my living room hung up. And I was like, yes, figure out what you need to do to get there. Right. And usually it was after something didn't go as planned. Right. It's like, okay, this didn't work. Now what? Or, and so I think it's important to have something. All of us should have something that is a reminder to keep us going. Right. So for me, that's my thing, is this quote that I said. So it's like, yeah, Jen, hello. you told people this, right? Yes, figure out what you need to do to get there. So I would encourage people to think about what is something that you could write down that will motivate you when you're kind of feeling down or discouraged or overwhelmed, that you can just pick up, read, and kind of help you reset and keep moving.
Right. I love that.
I think that's important, because we're not on 100% of the time. We all struggle. And it's not just about business. We have family stuff that goes on in our lives. Whether
Family
or not
stressors. There's
right.
so many things that go into this. There really is.
Right.
So Jen, you had a lot of clinical pearls today, as my students are saying, clinical pearls. Okay, we had a lot of pearls today. Is there anything else that you want to say? Our time is almost up. Is there anything else that you want to bestow to anybody? Because we're going to pick up on this. I have more questions that I'm going to ask you going into year number 2. You can ask me questions too, because I'm starting new businesses also. So, is there any other pearls that you want to bestow upon our listeners?
Not a pearl per se, but a call to action. And
I
my
like
call
that.
to action is not about you or your business or your goals. It's about helping others and being kind to others. And I was thinking about this over the past few days, because we've all seen all the political posts and the negativity, and there's just so much hate and anger. And it's so easy for people to get consumed in that. And even if you're not someone that's contributing to the post, you're reading them, and it's a downer, right? It's not a positive. It hinders your productivity. And so I want people to just be mindful of the energy they're putting out there, and make sure that you're being kind to others. You never know. I posted this on Facebook the other day because I saw it in a Starbucks, and it was like, you never know who is trying their best not to fall apart today, right? And so you just don't see people's struggles. And so if you can just sprinkle more kindness into the world, I know that sounds so cliche, but if you can just do your part to add more positivity, whether it's through your posts, through your physical or virtual interactions with people, you just never know what kind of effect that can have on somebody, and that can just make the difference in the world. It really can.
It can make all the difference in the world.
Yes.
Jen, thank you very much again. For all of our listening audience, the book is Move the Ball. Please, great book. If you're an entrepreneur, we'll help you. We'll get you ready for it. So please get the book. Jen, thank you very much. It's been a great conversation again. And I think that at some point in time, we're going to have our own show somewhere along the line on one of the major news networks. So if somebody's listening to this, this is only the beginning. So give us a call. You know how to contact us.
Yes. Yes.
Jen, thank you very much. Leadership expert, author, attorney. We will see all next week. Jen, thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Have an awesome week, and we'll see you next Monday.
Momentum Monday. Move the ball. We'll see everybody next week. Have a great week, all.